All right, everyone. It is time to start our webinar. We have all of our speakers with us, and I see we have a lot of participants. So, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. And as every 2 weeks, it's a pleasure to greet you and to welcome you to this sixth National Report technical webinar series. Since May, as you know, and until mid-July, this series will focus on best practices in using spatial data, example from around the world. My name is Marion Marigot. I am a UNDP technical specialist for the sixth national report to the CBD project, and I will be facilitating this webinar today together with my colleague Prudence Rain and Diego Ochoa. Spatial data can help us understand where biodiversity and ecosystem services are located, how human pressures impact nature, and the potential impact of conservation actions. The data also can help improve the effectiveness of measures to achieve the Haiti biodiversity targets and will guide the implementation of the CBD's post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. To ensure countries receive adequate support, we consolidated a roster of spatial data experts with more than 20 experts available to support you in producing maps for your 6NR and more generally to support you in any activity in linking spatial data in the future. This is a kind reminder, but if you are interested in learning more, you can reach me out at marion.marigot@undp.org. So for the past year and a half in this context, we challenged countries to double the number of maps in their sixth national report compared to the fifth national report. And we are on track to succeed, and it is now time to showcase best practices and learn from each other. To do so, and through this webinar series, we will host 4 webinars that demonstrates how 16 countries are using spatial data to enhance biodiversity conservation. And today, in our third webinar session, we focus on using the UN Biodiversity Lab to support biodiversity monitoring and reporting. And today we will have 4 presentations from 4 different countries: Haiti, Vietnam, Venezuela, and Iraq. Before we begin, as usual, I would like to share with you a few rules and dynamics for the webinar session. Microphones are muted during the presentation. That reduces interferences and facilitates communication. The session will last 2 hours, and after a presentation from the colleagues, we will open the floor for questions and remarks. If you think of a question while the presentation is in progress, you can use the control panel and write it. And when the Q&A session comes, I will read your question to our speakers so they can answer it. If you want to speak and the connection allows it, we will open your microphone during the Q&A session. To let us know that you would like to speak, you can simply raise your hand by clicking on the hand button in the control panel. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded on the NBSAP Forum YouTube channel, and we will also share the presentation on the NBSAP Forum and via email. For information, the presentations today will be given in English. However, I'm a native French speaker and my colleague Diego is a native Spanish speaker. And as such, we're happy to take questions in the 3 languages and we will translate them if necessary. And similarly, we can translate answers and responses in English to French and Spanish if needed. En français, pour information, la présentation du webinaire d'aujourd'hui sera donnée en anglais. Cependant, je suis francophone et mon collègue Diego est hispanophone, donc on peut prendre vos questions en anglais, en espagnol ou en français, et nous les traduirons si nécessaire. Et de même, nous pouvons traduire les réponses de l'anglais vers le français et l'espagnol si nécessaire. Y en español, para información, la presentación del webinar de hoy será en inglés. Sin embargo, soy francófona y mi colega Diego habla español. Por lo tanto, podemos responder sus preguntas en inglés, español y francés y las traduciremos si es necesario. De manera similar, podemos traducir las respuestas del inglés al francés y al español si es necesario. Back to English, I want to warmly welcome and thank you, the colleague from the 4th country, for being our speakers today. First, we will have Sandy Augustin, who will present the work done in Haiti. Then we will have Bui Hoa Bin, who will present the work from Vietnam. And following her, we will have Milagros Agudos Horta presenting the work in Venezuela. And finally, we will have Mark Whittingham presenting the work done in Iraq. So let's start with the first presentation from Haiti with Sandy Augustin. So Sandy, thank you for coming back this week after not being able to present 2 weeks ago. We really much appreciate. Sandy is a technical assistant for UNDP, and before joining UNDP, he worked as a consultant for Haiti's Agriculture Ministry. He holds a bachelor's degree in natural resources and environmental management from State University of Haiti and a master's degree in soil and environmental management from Montpellier Supagro. So over to you, Sandy. We will display your presentation. Prudence, maybe if you can display Sandy's presentation, and then Sandy, it will be your turn.
Okay, thank you, Marion. Good morning, everyone. So I will present for AD. My presentation will be on IT uses spatial data in conservation monitoring to manage biodiversity. In 2018, work began through an inclusive participatory process to develop IT's sixth national report. Consultation in group were held with stakeholders representing many groups involved in the environmental sector. Additionally, in order for the six ANA to represent national circumstances, four regional workshops were held in the West, Southwest, South, and Grand Est, North, and Northwest region. As a part of the sixth national report, an inventory of Haiti's current status of biodiversity was created, whilst setting priorities for biodiversity according to the recurring threats facing the country biodiversity. During this workshop, many different threats has been identified by the stakeholders. There's threats are over exploitation of forest resources, over exploitation of fishery resources, excessive cutting and backfilling of mangrove areas, pollution and poor waste management, fragmentation and alteration of ecosystem and habitats, climate change effect, lack of education. As we see that when we organize the consultation, we see that the people don't know really what is biodiversity, what they need to protect, and bad governance. Next slide, please. After identifying the threats with the stakeholders and the people who involving in the sector, 9 priorities for better conservation and management of the biodiversity were proposed. The first one is education and awareness, restoration and degraded ecosystem and mangrove, establishment of legal framework and governance for biodiversity protection in Haiti, promotion of ecotourism and agroforestry, fight against climate change effect, coral reef protection, conservation of animal and plant species, control of invasive species, and valorization of medicinal plants in Haiti. Great progress has been made in awareness raising of biodiversity issues, the limitation of protected area, publication of decrees, capacity building through the Biodiversity Directorate of Ministry of Environment, and the development of management plan for existing protected areas. When the strategic plan for biodiversity 2011-2020 was adopted in 2010, Haiti had only 3 protected areas. Now there are 25 protected areas in Haiti. Next. Indeed, when the strategic plan for biodiversity was adopted, as I said, now we have 25 protected areas, including 14 marine areas and 11 terrestrial areas, representing respectively 5.72% and 5.75% of marine and terrestrial territory of Haiti. National contribution of Haiti to ABT 11 about the protected area in Haiti. Despite the effort made, a big gap remains to be filled. Thus, in relation to the biological richness of certain areas, a proposal for a potential site to be protected was made in the sixth national report in order to achieve the ABT Aichi targets 11. Next one. Using geospatial data helps to monitor the evolution of ecosystems, change in land, plant and forest resources, and take appropriate action. Next one. Using spatial data, the country is starting to implement action for management of forest cover in some specific area through effective management of existing protected areas in Haiti. Next one. The Haitian government plan to establish 14 germoplasm centers with a production capacity of 4.5 million seedling pairs each in 10 geographical area departments of the country. For now, 4 of the centers are already functional. Using the global forest cover loss extent or gain data allow the government to area of forest loss where the reforestation activities need to be identified. As you can see in the picture, now we have 4 germoplasm centers in order to contribute to reforestation in Haiti. Next one. So geospatial data are of great value in implementing action plan for the effective management of protected areas in Haiti. They make it possible to have a real state of situation and a better guide decision making. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cindy, for making this presentation and highlighting the importance of spatial data and especially the UN Biodiversity Lab to guide, monitoring and the reporting on biodiversity. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we will take the questions after the presentation, all of the presentations. So you can write them down or you can keep them for the Q&A session. Just so you know, Cindy may have to go a bit earlier. So in that case, you can just share your questions for him with me and I can forward them to Cindy if needed. So now we're going to Vietnam with Bui Hoa Bin, who is a program officer at UNDP. She focuses on biodiversity conservation, chemicals, and waste, and she has worked with GIZ and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in the country. She holds a Master of Chemical Engineering from Dresden University and a Bachelor of Environmental Science from the University of Queensland. So Bin, the floor is yours. I'm going to open your microphone. And we have displayed your presentation, so you can start. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion, and hi, everyone. I hope I'm still awake because it's a bit late in Vietnam. I would like to share the experience from Vietnam in how we use spatial data in biodiversity conservation and also in preparing the sixth national report to show Vietnam's progress on the IT targets. Next slide, please. Yes, so Vietnam, I'm not sure you know where it is. It's located in the Southeast Asia, and it is one of the kind of the center of biodiversity in the world. And due to its importance of biodiversity, Vietnam is a member to CBD in 1994, and Vietnam, after our kind of renewal in 1986, we have seen a lot of economic growth in our development. Within economic growth, we also witnessed an kind of rapid increase in population within only 20 years, and we have like about 17 million people. We have more 17 people. And these, with the economic growth, with the population growth, with the urbanization and industrialization, the whole process has created some kind of unsustainable patterns and causing some threats to biodiversity. Next slide, please. And we are using because of the importance of biodiversity, and we also witness, the government of Vietnam witness the threats and also the degradation of biodiversity, and that's why the government of Vietnam has taken different efforts and actions to protect and to conserve biodiversity. For example, the law on biodiversity was enacted in 2008, and then Vietnam has different versions of NBSAP. The first NBSAP was promulgated in 1995, and then they have the updated version in 2014, and then different action plans. For example, recently we have the action plan to conserve sea turtles and also tigers. And so that's why Vietnam has achieved some achievements to biodiversity. However, there are still some barriers, and more things, more actions need to be taken. And that's why in the sixth national report, we have presented this trend, and also using spatial data and showing the change in biodiversity, and also to show what actions have been taken. Next slide, please. So you see, as I said before, Vietnam's had a national biodiversity strategy and action plan to 2020 and vision to 2030. And in this national targets, it's a long, action plans and targets. But in a short nutshell, in a nutshell, the country aims to increase the terrestrial protected areas to 9%, marine protected areas to 0.4%, and also increase the forest cover to 45%. These are the kind of highlights of the national targets that the government aim to achieve by 2030. Next slide. So how the government has been using spatial data in practice. Actually, we during the formulation of the sixth report, we faced some difficulties because the spatial data has been used in Vietnam, but the spatial data is very scattered, and this is kind of almost everywhere. That some agencies have some maps, some spatial data, the other agencies don't have. And there's no kind of standard forms of this spatial data, and mostly we just have maps in pictures, in the format of pictures. So it's quite difficult. But with the support of NR6 project, we managed to collect and also to prepare about 60 maps to show the change and the progress of biodiversity conservation in Vietnam. So we can kind of to show what is Vietnam has been achieved in accordance to the Arctic targets and also the different goals of the strategic biodiversity strategies. Next slide. So you see, so we have a spatial data to show the whole picture of forest cover in Vietnam, and in the past, due to different reasons like the war and also the economic growth, the land use change, the forest area reduced. But in the 1990s, the country has been implemented different measures and actions to increase the forest cover. And you can see in the graph showing their kind of a tendency for increase in the forest cover, and by now in 2017 the forest cover is 41.4%, and it is expected to be around 42% next year. Yes, next slide. So we also using the maps to analyze what does it mean? What does it mean for the forest cover increase? What does it mean for the threats of human activities to the forest? And you can see that from different maps, we can say that the forest cover increase, but the forest quality is declining because by now we increase the forest cover by increasing or by planting more new forest plantations. However, the primary forest has been declined, and also there are some kind of illegal loggings in natural forest. Next slide. So we also using the spatial data to show where are you can see the map on the left is the system of different terrestrial PAs in Vietnam, and you can see where they are along from the north to south and from the east to the west, and also these maps allows the government to identify different where are the problems, and this information is very important and useful for the decision-making process, especially on biodiversity. Next slide. Yeah, the same thing. The same thing in this slide. We also using spatial data to recommend where are the kind of the hotspot where the human pressures are the most I need more attention to, especially concerning biodiversity. So the policy interventions can take place. Next slide. And so this map again showing where are our terrestrial areas. So currently we have about 164 areas, and the goal is to increase to 176 by 2020. And hopefully we are on track on this. So it's very interesting if you listen to the Haiti presentation before me. Haiti has 3 PAs and increased to 25 PAs within after a few years of implementation. In Vietnam, we have a lot of areas, but this is also a problem because we talk a lot about how to ensure effective management of these PAs. Next slide. And yes, I'm sorry, the map here is very small in the presentation, but the map here showing how about the mangrove distribution in Vietnam, and the map is showing you where are the locations of mangrove forests in Vietnam. about 40 years ago, 50 years ago, the mangroves has decreased significantly. However, recently, Vietnam has different interventions, different governments decrees, and also the Prime Minister decisions to invest in protection and also afforestation in mangroves area. So the mangroves area has been kind of stable and increased, and there's a kind of stable at the moment. And the aim is to kind of enrichment of these existing mangroves. And we also have a spatial data on mangroves forest. Next slide. And also that is about the coral reefs and seagrass, and we also have a different maps and special data on where the coral reefs and seagrass distribution in the coast and also in the sea area of Vietnam, and it has been it's also so that the coral reefs and the seagrass suffer a decline and also degradation in the last few years due to increase due to different marine economic activities and also due to tourism activities. Next slide. So this slide has showing how the information of coral reefs and seagrass information has been used to incorporate it into policy decisions. And the map on the left showing where are the marine PA's network in Vietnam. So we have a target. By 2020, there will be 16 marine PAs in Vietnam, and by now we have established about 10 MPAs already, and 4 PAs has portfolios and all the profiles ready for establishment. So this target is on track, and you can see in the map. The marine PAs are distributed along the coast of Vietnam from the north to the south. Next slide. Yes, and we also using the spatial map to show the linkage between marine PAs, the marine biodiversity conservation with different economic activities like the fisheries and the fishing industry, and how to promote the development of responsible and sustainable fisheries. So the map on the right is showing the fishing line and the fishing zone along the coast. Next slide. Next slide.
There may be a slight delay in sharing the slide, so you can go ahead, and Prudence is figuring out how to go to the next slide. It's okay.
I see. Sorry. So if the next slide can come up, you can see in about the maps of where the juvenile fish are, and these kind of maps support the government to identify the new marine areas, ensuring that the marine-based economies are able to succeed in a responsible way. Yeah, that has been shown in the map. Next slide, please. So the spatial data also support us to show the kind of extension of some species in Vietnam recently, and for example, 9 species. Actually, I'm sorry that in this slide I forget to include some information that the spatial data also helped to show during 2014 and 2018 some new species also has been discovered in Vietnam, and this is a positive change showing the diversity of Vietnam's biodiversity, that we are many things many species are being discovered every day, and it's showing the kind of the good, the positive outcomes of different conservation activities has been taken. Next slide, please. So because we do, as I said earlier in my presentation, that in the beginning we had some difficulties in getting spatial data, and we only have some spatial data for some targets, IT targets only. For example, to IT targets 5, 6, 10, and 11, and we also have some kind of indirect information to other IT targets. But we hope that in the near future, in the next round of reporting to CBD, we can have more spatial data relating to a wider and broader IT targets. Next slide, please. So it has been yes. So during the 6th National Report preparation, we managed to collect a lot of maps and spatial data, and also a huge thank to the UN Biodiversity Lab, and because we received a lot of support, and which allow us to have a spatial data and how to use this one for our kind of monitoring and also reporting of biodiversity conservation activities in Vietnam. But it's and it turns out that it shows and it also strengthens that spatial data is very important, and it is an effective tool for the monitoring of biodiversity and also for reporting about biodiversity. So as I said before, it is very important for us to prepare the 6th national report, and we also look forward to using it more for the next national report to CBD. Thank you very much for listening, and yeah, if you have any questions, I'm happy to respond to.
Thank you, Vin, for the very insightful presentation. It's great, and I know it's late in Vietnam, and we really appreciate you presenting and sharing your perspective at this time and staying for the Q&A session. And in your presentation, we also saw, the maps from UN Biodiversity Lab, and I'm taking this occasion just to remind everyone that this type of maps is available for each of the 137 countries, JEP-eligible countries, that was supported by UNDP and UNEP to produce their 6th national report. But they're also available for further activities, So if you do want maps like that and you haven't seen them yet, be in touch with us, because we definitely have maps for you. And I know Vietnam has extensively worked with our spatial data experts, and well, the result is great. So thank you so much for your presentation again. So now we're going to hear from Venezuela with Milagros Agudo Horta. Milagros has a postgraduate studies in seed germination and conservation. She worked as a technical team director at the General Direction for Biological Diversity at the People's Power for the Ministry of Environment, and is also the CBD National Focal Point for Venezuela. She is currently the technical coordinator for the country 6NR, So Milagro, this is your turn, and I'm going to open your microphone and see if you can hear us. Hi, can you hear us? Milagro, you seem to be very far from the microphone. So maybe if you can get closer to the microphone.
Hola, Milagros. So sorry, I just had some issues here. Milagros, buenos días. ¿Puedes escucharme?
Ayúdame a esto, Roberto.
¿Podrías, por favor, poner en modo silencioso el computador?
Okay. Good morning. So sorry for this minute. We have some problem on the microphone. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you.
We can hear you very well.
Can you hear?
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mariam. Our panels is using spatial data to support biodiversity monitoring and reporting. The first one, please. Okay, Venezuela, with a land surface of 960,445 square kilometers, has a rich geographic diversity with Andean and coastal mountainous areas, low tropical rainforest areas, coastal lagoons, Precambrian mountain range of the Guyanese Shield, and alluvial plains of the Orinoco Basin. The most extensive bioregion of the country is that of Orinoco Plains, which extends from the Andean Piedmont to the west to the Orinoco Delta in the Atlantic at the east. The Orinoco Delta is the most extensive wetland in the country. This high, okay, the next please, the next, okay. Here you have these two maps, okay, are a proposal of the country for the distribution of the principal ecosystem of the Orinoco Plains. The next. Next, please. Here you have the recent actualization of the vegetation map of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Next, please. Next.
Milagro, there's a light delay in between the slides, so don't worry. Prudence is going through the slides, but it may take a bit of time. That's okay.
It's okay. Okay, sorry. Okay, about the richness in species of Venezuela. Venezuela has one of the highest indexes of biological diversity because of these numerous biomes that exist in the country, okay? And has to the principal centers of endemism of fauna and flora, okay, of the country. In fauna, more than 5,309 species of vertebrates and more than 110,000 species of invertebrates have been cataloged. In flora, at least 16,000, more than 60,000 of species have been recorded associated with 650 types of vegetation. Here you have a first map of the UN laboratory, biodiversity laboratory that shows the distribution of the species richness, no, in the country. The next one. This natural heritage is protected by a system of protected areas, the largest in Latin America, for protective, educational, recreational, and scientific purposes, covering an area exceeding the 57% of the territory. The UNBL map showed 54.1% of coverage of protected terrestrial areas. This value is close to the one referred in the official sources, that is 57%. Therefore, the spatial data can be used to support can be used as a support evidence, okay, for decision making. Here you have the laboratory, the UNBL laboratory map, which shows the system of protected areas. The next, please. Okay, this system is composed of 248 areas: national parks, natural monuments, recreational parks, protected areas, wildlife refuges, wildlife reserves, wildlife sanctuary, biosphere reserves, and zones of tourist interest. The two biosphere reserves, Alto Orinoco Casiquiare and Delta del Orinoco, conserve the biological diversity and the associated ecological process as the cultural heritage of the indigenous people and ancestral communities. Next, please. Here you have two of the maps of the UN BL, okay, that shows about the carbon biomass of carbon, okay, is storage in the country. The next. In these systems, recently, okay, there was the creation of the Caura Indigenous and Popular Natural Park in 2017, with more than 7 million of hectares of the Bolivar and Amazon states at the south of the country. The extension, this is one of the more extensive parks between the biodiverse countries, okay, where live near from 422 species of birds, 82 of reptiles, 28 of amphibians, with formations of tepuyes and Precambrian caves. This is the first megadiverse national park in the world. The protected natural areas in Venezuela are warrantors of protection of social and cultural diversity. Numerous traditions are preserved thanks to the existence of this space. More than 95% of the territory inhabited by the 34 Venezuelan ethnic groups correspond to these protected natural areas. Here you have the UNBL map that shows the I think that is the human print, okay, in relation with the system of protected areas. Next, please. The project to strengthen the marine coastal protected areas system in CPA of Venezuela led to a total of 17.56% of the area of MCPA being protected, exceeding the AG target on the protection of marine system, 10%, and contributing with the SDGs 13, 14, and 15. The map generated by the tool UN Biodiversity Lab show a percentage of natural coverage of marine protected area smaller, 4.2. A preliminary analysis of this difference could indicate that the entire coastal marine areas of the country were not taken in account in this case, for which it is necessary to adjust the global data sets. Here you have the map that shows the system of the coastal marine areas of the country. The next, please. The small program of the GEF, the SGPs, provides financial and technical support to projects aimed at the preservation, recovery of the environment, promotion of well-being and sustainable livelihoods to grassroots organizations and non-governmental organizations in areas such as biodiversity, change climate and soil degradation. Since 2010, more than 150 projects have been financed in Venezuela. During 2015 to 2018, 61 projects are being executed in the agriculture areas with agroecological principles and reforestation in various areas of the country. Next. The sixth national report of the CDB shows the commitment of the Bolivarian government to evaluate the status of conservation and the degree of implementation of the national strategy, the ECDG 2010 to 2020, as well as the country's contribution to the HE goals and the SDGs. The sixth ENR was prepared with the financial support of the GEF in collaboration with the of the UNDP as implementing agency. This national report identified various examples of organizational self-management for the sustainable use of species, which led to two designations of origin with cocoa and cacao species, and one declaration of intangible heritage of humanity by UNESCO with the curagua plants. The process also identified more than 60 successful local experiences that reflect the importance of integral action of diverse sectors for solutions to achieve a better management of the country's biological diversity. Thank you very much. We want to close this seminar with the following video.
Yeah, I don't think the sound is working on the video. So what we can do, Prudence, maybe you can copy paste the URL and then drop it in the chat box so everyone can actually watch the entire video. And then everyone, because we're going to share the presentations anyway, then we're going to have this presentation and everyone can rewatch the presentation and the entire video after that. And we are actually a bit short on time, I'm realizing, because we have one last presentation. So thank you, Milagro, for this really insightful presentation. Very interesting to see how the UN Biodiversity Lab has helped you and how you've been, efficiently managing these areas. I'm sure we're going to have a few more questions. We already received a question for you, so this is great. I'm going to mute you back, but then I'll open your microphone during the Q&A. Thank you so much. And I was presenting Mark, who's going to give the next presentation. And Mark, you are a professor in biology at the School of Natural and Environmental Sciences at Newcastle University, if I'm not wrong. And you work on a range of Iraqi-based projects concerning climate change, biodiversity, and ecosystem services. And your work embraces a wide range of projects linked to biodiversity and the development of the 6th National Report for Iraq. So now that everyone heard me, then I'm not on mute and we displayed your presentation. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marion. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Good. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to all of those listening in different parts of the world. And thank you for your inviting me to present the information about Iraq today. I acted as the international consultant for the 6th National Report, but there was a large number of people involved in producing the report, and I'd like to just mention a few of them at the beginning, which is Manal Aziza, Mukhtar Haba and Nadia Faza, who are all integral in working on the report, along with a large number of governmental and different NGOs in the country. So Iraq is in the Middle East, and in the northern part of Iraq it is mountainous and it goes down to the sea in the southern part of Iraq, and there are a wide range of different habitats. There's a large amount of desert areas in the west of the country, and capturing the biodiversity of the country, one way of doing that is to look at the IUCN Red List, and 1,388 species have been assessed on the Red List for Iraq. So that's a useful starting point to try and describe the sorts of biodiversity that there are in the country. Next slide, please. The first National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan in Iraq was produced for the period 2015 to 2020, and this includes 23 strategic national biodiversity targets and 34 actions for that period. So the actions can be categorized into 5 themes, which are biodiversity awareness and traditional knowledge, policy, protected areas and conservation, monitoring and assessment, and training. And for the purposes of the webinar today, I'm just going to be focusing on examples of the protected area work within Iraq and the use of spatial data, both what has been used, but also the potential for using spatial data in the future to capture a wider range of values of land areas within Iraq. Next slide, please. So if we take as our starting point the World Database of Protected Areas, and we just saw some of that information presented for Venezuela, the amount that's of protected areas in Iraq is much smaller than in Venezuela. And if you look in the northern part of the Iraq there's a little green segment at the top. That is the Barzan Nature Reserve, which borders onto Turkey. Which I was lucky enough to visit a year or so ago. It's an absolutely fantastic nature reserve. And going down to the in the south of the country, if you look just above Kuwait City, there's a green area, and that is the Central Marshes. Now the Central Marshes are were the first protected area to be designated in Iraq in 2014, following the issuance of the Protected Areas Law also in 2014. Now, currently, the World Database on Protected Areas is a really useful resource. There are approximately 170,000 protected areas globally, and the information that is presented on that database for Iraq includes 23 areas, but only 5 of those areas are currently formally ratified, so they have formal protection within the country. There are further 19 areas which are going through the ratification, the formal acceptance process, and once all those have been accepted, about 8.5% of the land area of Iraq will be under protected area management. Next slide, please. So that's kind of the current process, but also thinking to the future. A large project that was undertaken and was written up in 2017 was focused on a biodiversity survey of Iraq, which identified 82 key biodiversity areas. So key biodiversity areas is a formal process that is gone through that identifies areas with high amounts of biodiversity and focuses on particular species and species groups. And also, when that survey is undertaken, information is collected on the threats and also the actual spatial coordinates of those sites are collected, and information about the monitoring of the populations of some of the species are included. So the results of this survey, as I said, were presented in 2017, and they include a wide variety of taxa. So you can see here a nice photograph of a dragonfly and of one of the turtles in the central marshes here. So the information that is collected on that, and those have been defined and categorized as key biodiversity areas, but they have no formal protection within the legislation of the country. So these are, in a sense, potential future protected areas, but they can feed through into the process of nominating new protected areas. Next slide, please. So we just mentioned that the formal protected area coverage is 2%. And if we look again at the top with the brownish segment, that is the Barzan Nature Reserve again. And you can see surrounding that some of that red area, and that shows the some of the human footprint. So you can see that some of the negative aspects of or some positive and negative aspects of human interventions around that area. And you can see that by overlaying these data sets, you can compare what's happened with the protected area and what's happening to the landscape around it. So it's one way of looking at protected area effectiveness. So the idea being that once a protected area is formally notified and catalogued, that it should be, if it's working, reducing the amount of environmental impact in that area and close to that area. And this is really important when it comes to thinking about targeting how to manage protected areas and make sure that they're integrated with, or that they're actually working and monitoring them going forward. So it's possible to use the spatial coordinates of these protected areas, such as the Barzan, and underlay or overlay information of different types to look at how that protected area or protected areas in a country can be used to protect a range of different biodiversity, but also thinking about how that links through into wider environmental concerns linked to natural capital and environmental services. So if we look at the bottom of this map here, you can just see above Kuwait City, there's a brown area again, which is the Iraq marshes. And the Iraq marshes are a World Heritage Site, and they are important for the marsh Arabs who live there and the habitats that support not just the biodiversity, but also the livelihoods of the people that live there. So it's possible using spatial data to then look at the kinds of information or the kinds of metrics that might be really important to monitor over time about what's changing in and around these protected areas. So next slide, please. And here you can see, this shows there aren't many trees. There isn't a huge amount of tree cover in Iraq, but what there is largely focused on the northern border with Turkey and with Iran there. And you can see the light red pinkish dots that are in that northern area, and they show a loss in tree canopy cover. So this is the kind of data set, but I've included this here simply to show one type of data set. Other types of data set, as shown in earlier presentations of Venezuela and of Vietnam, show soil carbon. So if you're thinking about capturing carbon for climate change, then it's important to know where that carbon already is and how that protected area network can be used to protect not just where the biodiversity occurs, but also to get multiple co-benefits from these other types of things which occur in the land use. Now, the protected area at the moment for Iraq covers about 2%, but once those areas are designated that are currently in the system, then it will cover about 8.5%. The CBD target is 17% of the land area. So there's some way to go, but incredibly good rapid progress has been made in terms of increasing the number of protected areas within the country. Next slide, please. So there's a range of scientific and technical needs were identified linked to protected areas in the 6th National Report work. Firstly, capacity building in technical skills such as spatial software. Secondly, capacity building in undertaking assessments of ecosystem services and its value. So the first paper was published in within the last year, looking at the central marshes and measuring their ecosystem service value across a range of different areas, including the reeds, the milk that's produced by the water buffalo that are in the system, and the different economic values to the people that live there. Now, particularly with ecosystem services, the spatial component is really important. So if I take it as an example here, pollination, some of the major insect pollinated crops in Iraq include dates and apples. Any sort of crop that needs an insect to pollinate it in order to produce fruit or yield is important that the key pollinators are present very close spatially to where that crop is grown. So we know from the global pollinator assessment that between 12.5% and 15% of the economic output from crops that are insect pollinated is due to the pollination by those insects. So 12.5% to 15% of the economic value of those crops is due to those insects. And what we know at the moment is where the crops, or it's easier to look at where the crops are, but then to look at the spatial distribution of the invertebrates is really important to think about future-proofing different types of the different types of landscapes and farming landscapes that can be used to promote high yield using biodiversity. The Key Biodiversity Area Survey was great, but it's a snapshot. What's needed is further support to carry out further rapid assessments of not only those 82 sites to check what's happening to them through monitoring, but also to expand that network of sites. Part of what came up in the 6th National Report was a kind of the process of actually highlighting, or the process of once a site is identified and formally getting it through the system, so it's a formally protected area in Iraq. That still takes a number of years. And if you think about the timescales involved, some of the other countries that have already been presenting have been designating protected areas for decades. Iraq's quite new to the game at this, and actually getting some help with best practice from elsewhere to make that a swifter process would be very welcome. And generally, the final point is needing to incorporate a wide range of factors into decision making. So thinking about natural capital and ecosystem services, such as water quality, air quality, and some systems are in place for measuring water quality through several hundred water quality stations on the major rivers in Iraq, and also air quality, but building those into some of that spatial planning to think about how best to manage the environment. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to finish by summarising and saying that substantial progress has been made in establishing a PA network in Iraq. The legislation for those underpinning protected areas was only passed in 2014, but the number of sites is currently 5, with 19 in the pipeline and 82 candidate sites identified for the future. Spatial planning, as has been made available by the wonderful UN Biodiversity Lab, which was a really valuable resource to have when working on this 6th National Report, is crucial to moving forward to enabling the protected area network to cover the range of different services and biodiversity that's available. And there are statistics such as zonation, which can be used to test the formal fit between protected area network and whatever metric it is you're looking to maximize. Thank you very much for listening. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, for that presentation and for reminding us also at the beginning how important the WDPA is. And just so you know, the database, the WDPA database, so it's linked to the UN Biodiversity Lab. So every time the WDPA is updated, then the data in the UN Biodiversity Lab is also updated, and that is very useful for countries that are using the lab, so they can combine, you know, national data sets and global data sets to prepare actionable maps. Thank you again, Mark, for that presentation. And now we have heard from the 4 speakers, and each of them showed how important spatial data is to monitor biodiversity, but also how the UN Biodiversity Lab could support those countries in the national and the global assessments. I would like now to invite participants to share their questions, their comments, their perspective also with our speakers. You can raise your hand to participate to the Q&A session. And for that, you can use the control panel to share your question. You can also write your question if your microphone is not connected, and I can read it again in English, French, or Spanish. Keep in mind that we are a very international team, and not everyone is native English speaker, including me. So speak slowly and clearly. That would be fantastic. We received actually a few questions while the presentations were going. And the first one was actually for Venezuela. Milagro, this is for you. So I'm going to read it in English, and Diego will be able to translate it in Spanish. So you said that 95% of the territories were inhabited by 34 ethnic groups that correspond to protected area, you know? And so how to use the indigenous knowledge to improve spatial data and the decision-making process. So Diego, if you want to maybe translate that in Spanish, and then Milagro can respond.
For sure. 95% de los territorios habitados por los 34 grupos técnicos se corresponden con áreas protegidas naturales de acuerdo con la presentación, con su presentación. Cómo el uso de los datos espaciales puede incorporar las visiones indígenas en el trabajo de conservación que se lleva a cabo en Venezuela.
Gracias por la presentación y las preguntas. Bueno, lo que yo podría decir digamos, al momento de haber terminado este informe, en principio, uno de los principales reportes que nosotros hemos incorporado al sexto informe nacional es que se han venido demarcando los territorios pertenecientes a los grupos étnicos existentes en Venezuela. Inclusive, un logro, digamos, a lo largo de los últimos años bien importante ha sido la entrega de la titularidad de sus tierras. Esta información podría permitir, por lo menos, conocer de la distribución de tales grupos, inclusive, como es la condición de las comunidades indígenas, inclusive de aquellos más aislados, ¿no? Y adicionalmente, pues estaríamos hablando, además de tener definidas las tierras desde el punto de vista, digamos, geográfico-espacial, podríamos estar hablando de que podríamos tener incorporados, por ejemplo, la parte de los planes de ordenación de su territorio con el desarrollo de los mismos, con la participación de los miembros de estas distintas comunidades.
Permítame, voy a entonces a traducir. So, Ms. Milagros just point out that one of the main results from the 6NR is that it includes the demarcation of the ethnic territories in Venezuela. One of the main achievements of this demarcation is the delivery of the tenure rights on some of these areas for indigenous people, and this information allows to know the distribution of these ethnic groups, indigenous and others, especially those, or even those that are isolated from the Western society. This is going to define, or is going to lead the ordination of the territory of them, and also, the zoning planning of those areas, and promote the participation of ethnic groups in the decision-making process. That's it. No estoy seguro, Milagros, si hizo falta alguna referencia. I'm not sure if any of your thoughts was not included in my translation.
¿Me escucha? Ok, no, sí, estoy de acuerdo con lo que acaba de traducir.
Ok, muchas gracias, Milagros.
Thank you very much, Milagro. In the meantime, we also received another question. We actually have a couple of questions. We received another question from colleague that is asking for Iraq this time. So Mark, this is for you. How does the spatial data process support the declaration of the additional 19 areas that you mentioned during the presentation? So in what, really the spatial data made a difference?
Okay, so I think the areas have been, it's a bottom-up process that those 19 areas have gone through a series of consultations, and the precise delineation of the boundaries of those sites have not formally been ratified. I don't know if that answers the question, but spatially the data will be uploaded, but in terms of how the spatial data at the moment, I think the protected area network is sufficiently small, but as it grows, looking at the connectivity and the representativeness will become increasingly important, if that makes sense. So at the moment, because it's such a small network, looking at representativeness is it will become increasingly important. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. We have another question from our colleague. Let me open this. From our colleague Ashim, who's asking, so the question was mostly for Haiti, but Haiti and Cindy had to go because they had an emergency. So I'll forward the question to him, but actually this question can be applied to each of our participants. What are the difficulties that you have encountered when you were creating maps? So this is actually for all of the countries, and I may start with Bin. I know you came back a bit after and I muted your microphone. So Bin, if you're still here and you can hear me, yeah. Perfect. What were the most important difficulties, let's say, when you created a map?
As I said earlier in my presentation, that in Vietnam, the data the data is everywhere. So some agencies have some data, but they are not comprehensive. And the data is in different format, and they are not spatial data. And even when they are in spatial data, they also have a different standards. So it's our huge difficulties in kind of collecting data and also how to analyze them.
Yeah. That makes total sense. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and also because we don't have any kind of one agency that we can come and ask, like, can I have the spatial data for this information? That we don't have that. So even, for example, Monterey is the one who responsible for environment and also for biodiversity conservation. They don't have a database, so they don't have archives and database.
Yeah, I think the issue of having the database and the data, accessible and shared with stakeholders is a big challenge, and this is something that we've heard a lot from a lot of countries as we were supporting them. So I would say this is definitely one of the issues. Mark, maybe do you have any other perspective on that or anything to share with us?
Yeah, I think some of the globally available data sets are, although they're available, actually using them is a whole different challenge. So And I think that's one of the real values of the Biodiversity Lab, because sometimes getting information, say the spatial coordinates of species from the IUCN Red List, actually plotting those, you need quite a lot of technical knowledge to plot those onto a GIS map. So although lots of information and lots of data resources are there, but in order for people to use them and access them, a lot of training is required, which is why the UN Biodiversity Lab was so valuable. So I think it's making that data sets easier to use in order for decision makers to get to that information so that they can use it.
Absolutely, I agree. And again, I take that opportunity to remind everyone that we do have a roster of spatial data experts that is available for JEF-supported countries, and we have, let's say, preferential salaries for each of those experts. So do not hesitate to be in touch with us if you would appreciate the support of a spatial expert in the next 2 months for the CSNR or for the implementation of your NBSAP. Diego, would you mind translating this question on the difficulty of creating maps? So Milagro can respond in Spanish as well.
Sí, básicamente la pregunta es sobre cuáles dificultades han enfrentado en el desarrollo de datos espaciales en su país.
Okay. One of the principal problem is, okay, I am with my Spanish here.
Diego can translate. Diego can translate in Spanish.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to answer in Spanish, okay? Uno de los principales problemas que existe para la elaboración de los mapas es la existencia de vacíos de información, ¿ok? Y las dificultades y las limitaciones que hay usualmente en el país, dependiendo de los casos, por supuesto, a nivel de magnitud, en cuanto a las capacidades que se requieren para levantar la información necesaria.
Okay, she mentioned two main issues on our difficulties to develop the spatial data. The first one is gaps on information. There are not too much information on many of the topics that they want to cover. And the other is the limitations on technical capacity. That depends, you know, the magnitude depends on the area, on the topic, but there are technical capacity limitations to bring this information and to put it in spatial data.
Thank you, Milagro. Anything else you would like to add, or all good?
¿Algo más para agregar?
Y si no, we have another question.
No, está bien. Estoy de acuerdo con la respuesta.
Gracias, Milagro. Another question we have actually is a bit in link with this question that has been asked, and I may start with you, Bin. How do the decision maker receive the maps and the spatial data? How do they, you know, what's their reaction when you come with a 6 national report that has evidence and that has geospatial data to support your assessment? Is it a positive reaction?
Actually, it's, I think it's positive. We just have a closing workshop of the 6th national report last Thursday, and we presented the 6 national reports, and our participants from different agencies highly appreciated the maps, and the maps helps visualization better. So I think spatial data is very important for decision-making process. But what we need more, for example, in the case of Vietnam, not all the data we have spatial data and maps. We only have some data that can be easily presented in spatial data and in maps. So I think we need to invest more on this. So it's easier for decision maker to have a look at these spatial data and maps, so they can know the chance. I think it's important, and we can use the spatial data and the map to compare, for example, the change between 2014 and 2018, and this can be shown in the maps. And that is kind of, we don't have enough data to show that in the 6th national report.
That makes total sense. Thank you. What about Iraq, Mark? I know you've been working on a lot of projects involving some spatial data. Does that change something with the decision makers?
I mean, I think the maps are a very powerful way of showing and what's already been said in terms of being able to show temporal change and being able to represent what has happened. And I think that it's just a very powerful way of showing it. A picture paints 1,000 words. So I think being able to show some of the, say, the impacts of climate change, we haven't done that yet, but say looking at the number of days that are above 50 degrees C, which is the permitted temperature, you're not allowed to work above that temperature. So being able to show those sort of changes through time and spatially is a very powerful way of being able to show how the environment links through to economic change. So I would just say that yes, it is a very powerful tool.
Perfect. And I want also to have the perspective of Milagro from Latin America. Milagro and Diego, I may ask you to translate that as well. Milagro, what's the reaction of decision makers to the maps you are presenting them? Is it positive? Is it helpful? Diego, if you can translate this.
¿Cuál sería o cuál considera usted es la reacción de los tomadores de decisiones frente a la evidencia que muestra la actividad de los datos espaciales? Si hay una reacción positiva o una reacción no tan positiva frente a lo que la evidencia espacial muestra en temas de biodiversidad.
Bueno, lo primero que tengo que decir es para el presente informe haber contado con la posibilidad de los datos del Laboratorio de Biodiversidad de las Naciones Unidas, nos resultaron ser, o constituyeron una referencia para nosotros en relación con los datos o con la información, por supuesto, que nosotros teníamos en relación con nuestros logros, ¿ok? Y, digamos, las autoridades, que en este caso son los decision making, ¿ok? Para nosotros, en este sentido, mostraron en principio su acuerdo. Sin embargo, pues existe, digamos, lo voy a tratar de decir en español, un cierto requerimiento, yo diría como celo, pero es un cierto requerimiento de comprobar, ¿verdad?, la veracidad de esta información en relación a los datos con los que nosotros disponemos, ¿ok? Por ejemplo, les pongo por ejemplo, de hecho, en el caso de las zonas marino-costeras, el mapa del laboratorio UN muestra un valor estimado de áreas protegidas de 4.2%, si no me equivoco. Y en nuestro caso, el proyecto nacional que recientemente terminó estimó un poco más del 17%, inclusive por encima de la meta Haiti, que es uno de nuestros grandes logros, ¿no? En este caso, eso implica que habría que ajustar el dato proveniente del laboratorio. Entonces, lo que yo diría en principio es que se está de acuerdo, pero por supuesto siempre con el requerimiento de revisar, y si es necesario, o sea, revisar la data, y si es necesario, pues corregirla al respecto.
¿Me puede, por favor, repetir el dato marino-costero, sí, los dos datos marino-costeros, por favor?
Ok, el dato que aporta el laboratorio UN, por lo menos el primer mapa al que nosotros nos llegó, tiene un estimado de 4.2%, ¿ok? De áreas. Aquí me lo están dando a leer. El del mapa es 4.2%, ¿ok? Y el nuestro, que está estimado con base a un proyecto de varios años que terminó recientemente, está con un valor por encima del 17%, o sea, 17.56%. Lo que nosotros decimos al respecto en el informe es que hay que ajustar esta información, pues hay que revisarla y ajustarla, porque de lo que se trata es que probablemente hay áreas marinos-costeras nuestras cuyos datos de superficie no han sido tomados en cuenta.
Correcto. Permítame, voy entonces a hacer la traducción.
Ajustar el valor.
Okay, perfecto. I'm going to translate now. She's saying that there are several references for the data, and there is an agreement between what the UN Biodiversity Lab and the national data are, but however, there are some requirements to test and to comprobar. I'm sorry. Sorry, hold on. There are some requirements to check again the veracity of the data from the UN lab, and she put one of the examples related to the marine coastal areas. So the UN Biodiversity Lab, for instance, is saying that there are 4.2% of the area, but the national data showed that it's about 70%, which is really above for the Aichi target. So that implies that there is a need to review and to check those data between the UN Biodiversity Lab and the national data. So at the beginning, of course, there is a consensus and an agreement on those data, but in some points and some topics, it is necessary to review and compare both and review the data.
Thank you, Diego. Thanks very much. And that also highlights again how important it is to have, local communities and indigenous people that can double check what is being produced at the global level, as opposed to, just having those data unchecked and verified. I really strongly encourage everyone to take advantage of the 15 minutes left we have to ask questions. I see many of you that I work with in the 6NR project, and I know many of you not yet have submitted the 6NR, so this can be a great opportunity to actually discuss with our expert and exchange with them, have your questions, or you can share also your perspective if you have submitted the 6 national report. We do have another question in the meantime. That's actually a very general question. How did the maps help reporting in your 6 national report? So that's a general discussion and a general question. I may ask to you, Mark, first. I know actually Iraq has finished the 6 national report recently. So how has it been helping you having maps in this report?
I think it's been very useful to illustrate various processes that have gone on and progress that's been made. So being able to have maps to illustrate, for example, the protected areas that we've just been talking about, but also to show a wide range of different, for example, where all the water stations are in Iraq, where the air quality monitoring places are. Just to be able to visually show that is a really good aid to just saying there are 200 and so water monitoring stations, but being able to show that, and in the case studies as well, using spatial data just to illustrate the locations and the work that's been done in different areas has been really helpful.
Great. And what about in Vietnam, Ben? I don't think Vietnam has yet submitted the 6 national report, but it is about to.
Yes, we're about to. Actually, we have the Vietnamese version already. we have the draft English version, but we need some kind of you know, addition and revision of language in the report before we can formally submit to CBD. Yes, in my presentation, I also said that we only can kind of directly show some goals, some IT targets by spatial data. And for other targets, we have to use, you know, text and figures and tables. So when you see the Vietnamese 6NR report, you can see that we have a maps, and we tried our best to show the link between the status, the change, the progress with these maps, but not all the targets or not all the goals are, you know, presented in maps and spatial data.
And thank you. And I'll turn to Diego to translate that question in Spanish for Milagro.
Can you repeat the question in English, please? Just to be sure that I got all the information.
Absolutely. How did the maps help reporting in the 6th National Report? And I think Venezuela has submitted their 6th National Report, and if not, is very close to do so.
Milagro, básicamente la pregunta es cómo los mapas ayudaron a fortalecer o mejorar el 6º reporte nacional. No estoy seguro si ustedes ya lo remitieron.
We can hear you.
Okay. Bueno, uno de los aspectos que logramos con la incorporación de estos mapas es que pudimos tener como referencia un mayor número de información espacial disponible, ¿okay? Como referencia en relación a la biodiversidad y aspectos relacionados en nuestro país en comparación con el 5º informe. Y para nosotros, en principio, en este momento, pues la herramienta pues puede significar por lo menos como un marco referencial, ¿ok? Que permita, por una parte, por ejemplo, como en el caso de las áreas protegidas terrestres, comprobar o confirmar el dato que nosotros estamos estimando como real, porque son datos, digamos, similares en órdenes de magnitud, o en otros casos, pues, conducir o sugerir, digamos, correcciones de información pertinente si es el caso.
Gracias, Milagro. Thank you very much, Milagro. Basically, there are some aspects that are incorporated into the 6th National Report. She has mentioned it that there is a major reference on number of information on spatial data on biodiversity in comparison with the 5th National Report. So there is an increase of the spatial data information and maps into the 6th National Report. And this tool can be treated like a reference, like a framework, a reference framework in 2 ways. One of them is to check and confirm that the national data and the data that is shown by the UN Biodiversity Lab are similar, so that there is a double confirmation on the information for both sources, or suggest corrections on the data if the difference is high between both sources, and then review and see how the information can be reviewed and then corrected in you know, either in the national data or in the UN Biodiversity Lab.
Great, thank you, Diego, and thanks, Milagro, for your response. We do have another question from our colleague from Iraq, actually, Manal, who's asking if the tool, the Biodiversity Lab, will continue assisting CBD parties after the 6NR. And the answer is yes. We are trying to make sure that the push for spatial data is not just for the 6th National Report, there's much more to do after the 6th national report, and these steps still need to be implemented. So we really hope that spatial data literacy, will increase, and that it will become much more systematic in terms of reporting, but also in terms of monitoring and implementing the NBSAP. So that's why we're constantly improving the platform, and we really want to have the feedback from users and from the countries using national projects. And for countries that do not have national projects, you can still use the global data sets. And we really want to have some feedback and ways to constantly improve that to better respond to the needs of the countries. I'm going to give 30 seconds to see if there's any other questions. I do not see any hand raised. I do not see any questions so far. This is your very last chance to ask our expert. And if we do not have any questions, then I'm going to turn over to Milagro again for maybe some concluding remarks on this webinar. Tico.
Estimada Milagros, pues no hay más preguntas por ahora, pero nos gustaría conocer sus pensamientos finales, sus conclusiones finales para la audiencia.
Okay. Sorry por retrasarme en el uso del micrófono. Bueno, en relación al uso de esta herramienta del laboratorio UN, bueno, lo que hemos dicho, digamos, a lo largo de la discusión y el resto de los países con los cuales he compartido el panel, pues ha significado una herramienta que permite referenciar o utilizarse como una referencia, ¿ok?, para disponer de datos espaciales en relación con diferentes aspectos de la diversidad biológica de cada país. Sin embargo, bueno, no, la palabra no sería sin embargo, pues el otro punto importante es que, por supuesto, hay que chequear los datos. Es decir, si bien es cierto que existe un estimado a partir de los datos del laboratorio, estos, pues, por supuesto, pueden servir o para confirmar los datos que están obtenidos o estimados para el país a nivel del propio país, y eso no siempre coinciden, como fue en el caso de nosotros para las zonas marino-costeras. En ese caso, pues, hay que revisar la data, pues, pertinente, ¿no? Sobre todo si existe en el país una evidencia de respaldo en relación al dato que nacionalmente se ha estimado. Yo pienso que pudiera ser, o sea, puede ser una herramienta que en la medida que los países puedan compartir sus experiencias en el caso de manejo de datos espaciales, es una herramienta que va a mejorarse progresivamente y puede constituirse en un instrumento de apoyo para, no solamente para la elaboración de los informes nacionales, sino para el manejo de la data, digamos, a nivel de cada uno de los países partes.
Correcto. Okay, so she agrees on all the panelists today for the different countries. She says that the UN Biodiversity Lab has it's a tool that allows to use as a reference for spatial data and to test and make comparations on different aspects of biodiversity. It is important anyway to review this data and confirm, because not all the times the national data and the data from the UN Biodiversity Lab are coincident. So it is important just to check out which data or how we can test which data showing the real information, and she quote the case of the coastal marine areas that she mentioned during her presentation. And she also said that it's important to review the data and make comprobations on evidence from between the national data and the sources from the UN Biodiversity Lab. It could be a tool that the countries can share and use to improve the information that is included, not just for the 6 national reports, but for other decision-making processes related to biodiversity, and especially for the management of the spatial data in the countries.
Fantastic. Thank you, Milagro, for your concluding elements, and Diego for translating this. Mark, do you have anything that you would like to conclude on for today?
I think just it's been very interesting looking at how some of the other countries around the world have approached the problem, and there's clearly some overlap in terms of the same sorts of problems, the same sorts of issues in terms of thinking about protected area, location, and I think there are off-the-shelf solutions to looking at how to assess the quality of protected area networks for different things, and there's clearly a really good work that's gone on around the world in different areas, looking at different issues to do with protected areas, and there's more that can be done that would have greater effectiveness on the ground, I think, that can be done, and obviously that needs to be done in conjunction with making sure that effectiveness happens on the ground, very much so, but it's part of the story, and it's really good to see such good work going on in different places.
Great, fantastic, thank you so much. And I'll turn to Bin. Bin, I know it's almost 10 p.m. where you are in Vietnam, and if you're still here and would like to unmute yourself and provide maybe some concluding remarks for today's webinar, if you're still here, which may not be the case. Oh yeah, she is.
Hi. Hello. Yes. Yes, it's very late. But thank you very much for allowing me to present the case of Vietnam and solution to other 4 countries. It's very interesting to know how other countries using spatial data from Haiti, Venezuela, and then Iraq, and so I myself also learn a lot. And especially you can see that different countries have different priorities. Like for example, in Haiti, they only have like 25 PAs. In Iraq, for example, only 2%. The PAs covers only 2%, but in Venezuela, the PAs areas covers about 57%. And in Vietnam, we aim to have, now at the moment we have a 7.5%, and we aim to increase to 9% of terrestrial PA. So different countries have a different status and different measures and different challenges and different solutions. So I learned a lot today from the webinar, and I also learned that spatial data is very useful, and it is a powerful tool for us to monitor and to report on biodiversity, and also it's also a powerful tool for us to inform our decision makers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bin, for staying so late, and well, general thank you to Bin, Mark, Milagro, and Cindy for your informative presentation. It was really interesting for us to hear about spatial data in your national contents for the 6NR, and see how the UN Biodiversity Lab supports you in doing so. And also thank you for the participants for attending this webinar. I want to give you a few information for the next webinar, so stay online for 1 more minute. The next and the last session of the webinar series will be hosted in 2 weeks on Tuesday, 9th of July, from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. in New York, which is an hour earlier than today. And we will have 3 countries, the 3 COP presidencies, so Mexico, Egypt, and China, that will share their experience on how can spatial data help develop national policies related to the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. So we encourage you to participate and engage on this important topic as we are entering the second half of 2019, and we're all going to be working together, of course, on the post-2020 framework. So we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you again to everyone. Have a great day or a great night, depending on where you're in the world, and see you in 2 weeks. This concludes the webinar.